Hello guys and welcome back to the channel, and in today's video what I thought I would share with you is a lot of different things that I did to get this bike started. Now I bought this off Facebook Marketplace almost a week ago now as a non-starter. The guy assured me that it started and I kind of took his word for it. He did say you can go and get petrol and test it if you want. Got it home and lo and behold it wouldn't start. So the process of me doing a load of research to figure out how this thing could be started, etc. Commenced. And eventually I did manage to get it going. So what I thought I would share now is everything that I did in order to get this bike running again. And hopefully this will be useful to all kinds of different petrol powered mopeds, both 2 and 4 stroke. They all kind of work in a similar way. So hopefully this troubleshooting that I did will be of help to you as well. And I hope that it can get your moped started if you're having trouble with it. So I'm going to go from the back of the bike all the way to the front and go through absolutely everything that I did. It could have been a combination of things why this wasn't starting. And before I start, I will tell you what was happening. So basically, first of all, I had to figure out the start procedure for this because it's a little different to what I've usually had in the past. It's usually just turn of a key. With this one, you actually have to pedal it and you have to pull a decompression lever on the front of the bike. You hold that and pedal, and then you pull the throttle and you hear the bike catch, and then you let go of the decompression lever and the thing in theory boots up, but mine wasn't doing that. With easy start fired through the carb, it would kind of splutter and start, but then as soon as that had burnt off, the thing would die. So there was obviously something wrong with it. I tried loads and loads of different things and eventually I did get it going. So I'm going to start with the fuel tank. Obviously it goes without saying, make sure that you have fuel in the tank. If there's fuel in the tank when you get it, I would strongly suggest just getting rid of that and putting in fresh fuel so you 100% know that you've got fresh fuel in it. I also put a little bit of Red X in this. Now I don't know if that is going to be particularly good for this age of bike, but it might do some good of clearing out the inside. So that's the first thing that I did. The tank is a little bit dirty, and I do plan on cleaning that at a later date. That could be another reason why your bike's not starting. It could be getting dirty petrol. So definitely investigate that. And one thing that you can do is to pour in some petrol, swill it all out, and then pour that away, and then put fresh fuel in. That just will get rid of anything that's loose in there. And obviously there's ways you can go ahead and completely clean the tank as well if you wanted to do that. So that's definitely a good place to start. Just make sure you're getting nice, clean fuel to your carb. So moving down, you've got your, I think it's called a pitcock. So obviously when you're trying to start the bike, make sure this is switched to on if you've got one of these. This is currently off because I'm not using the bike. And just make sure that that's all clean and everything as well. You might want to take that out of your tank because a lot of the time you'll get sort of stuff collecting at the top of it. So you might want to take that off and give it a clean. I didn't do that on mine and the bike started, so it wasn't the problem, but you could go ahead and do that if you wanted to. I chose not to, and that didn't end up being a problem anyway. Moving along, the next thing is check your fuel line. Make sure it's intact, make sure there's no leaks. This could be blocked, so that's another reason why your bike might not start. You might not be getting a good fuel supply because there's blockages in the line. Probably the best bet for that is to take it off and throw some compressed air down it. If you can't do that, just hold it up to the light and see if you can see down it and make sure there's no blockages. Worst case scenario, go ahead and replace that. And what I've done, I've not fitted it yet because I'm waiting for a fuel filter as well, but I've got some transparent line ready to go on. So you'll be able to see exactly if there's any problems. I think that's a much easier way of having the petrol lined up, is if you can actually see inside the line, right? And that moves on to my next point, what I've just mentioned there. I would suggest getting a fuel filter, especially on older bikes like this where it is likely that there's going to be crap in the fuel tank. Just get one of those little inline filters and that'll do a job of getting rid of most of those little particles that come out through the petrol and hopefully get you getting a really nice clean supply of fuel to your carb. I'm going to go ahead and do that as soon as that arrives. Obviously, like I've just shown you, I've got the cable ready. That will be going in somewhere along here. Okay, now moving along, we've checked the fuel line and the next place that goes to is the carb here. So what you'll want to do next is check the carb, and the first part of that will be the air filter. So this had an air filter on it which attached along here. You can see it kind of pulls air through the frame, and there was an air filter on here, and then that goes into the carb. Now I've completely removed mine just so there's no way that can be an issue. I actually opened it up and there was a piece of kitchen foam inside it used as an air filter, so that's not going to be giving it the right kind of air to fuel mixture if you haven't got the correct filter. Now I could have gone ahead and got the correct filter for it, but what I'm actually going to do is just stick a cone filter on the end of this. So just for the sake of getting it started in a test run, I've just run the carb with no air filter at all, but obviously highly recommended that you get that sorted out as soon as possible, because you don't want anything getting sucked into there and ruining your engine. So I took mine off, but definitely have a look inside your air filter. If you've got a carb, your bike will definitely have one. Open that up, see how dirty it is, see if you can order a replacement, or you could do like I've done and just measure the diameter here and then buy the appropriate cone filter to pop on the end. I just think that's a lot easier to maintain, and it looks a bit cooler as well, so that's why I've ordered one of those. So when that comes, I'll be popping that straight on the end, and that will sit nicely on there. Good thing about the stock air filters, it comes with this little kind of elbow, so I'll be able to use this to point this cone filter wherever I want to, kind of out the way. It just gives me a bit more flexibility to get it out of the way, which is quite nice. Okay, so we've done fuel, we've done air. Those both should be in good stead by now if you've been following this video. And the next thing that you want to do is start looking at the carb. If your bike's still not starting at this point, you've checked all that stuff, you need to start looking at the carb. So I would go ahead first of all and remove the bottom of your carb. Now this is called the float bowl, and you can see this on the bottom here. So you can see there's a kind of like a divide along the edge. The bottom half is the float bowl, and there'll be fuel in here. Pull that out. There's 2 screws for mine. You can see one here and there's one around the back as well. Pull that out, have a look inside. Mine was absolutely full of crap when I picked this up. It was full of all kinds of horrible stuff. So I completely got that out, cleaned it all out, made sure everything was looking nice and clean in there. You can go really, really strong with the cleaning with carbs. You can get carb cleaner. You can soak them in all kinds of different things to get them really, really clean. So first of all, definitely check your float bowl and make sure that's clean. If you clean that out and it's still not starting, I went to the next level of cleaning this carb. I completely removed the carb and I opened it up, and I'm not going to do this on this video because it could be a whole video in itself talking about cleaning a carb. Just look up on YouTube how to clean out a carb. It's really, really simple to do. A lot of the times with bikes, especially if they haven't been run for a long time, is that the jets inside the carbs get blocked. Now, this sounds really daunting, but it's really, really simple to fix. All you have to do is open up your carb and make sure you film yourself so that you know where everything goes back if you forget, so then you can look at the video back. There'll be some little brass cylinders usually that have tiny, tiny little holes in them, and these get clogged up really easily. So all you have to do is find a really, really fine piece of metal, and I actually used the wire off a wire brush. I got a little piece of that and just poked through all the holes on the jet, put it all back together and made sure everything was back to how it was. And that could have been one of the contributing factors to how I got this started, but I'll talk more about that at the end. So yeah, if you're still having problems after you've done the line and the air, have a look at your carb, make sure that's all clean, and hopefully all your jets will be clear as well. Another thing to check on the carb is the fuel air mix. Now this is a little screw, you can see it here. So this one's for your idle, which you can basically fiddle around with once the engine's running and get it in a nice position where it's idling nicely and not too forced and not about to die. You can fiddle around with this while it's going. But before you get it going, make sure this screw here is correctly set up. Now, I managed to find out how to position this from a YouTube video. So basically what you want to do, especially for these Hondas, apparently this is the perfect setup for these Honda engines, is to screw it all the way in as tight as it'll go. So tighten it all the way up and then back it off anti-clockwise 1 1/4 turns. So all the way around and then 1/4 and then just leave it. That's how mine's set up at the moment, and the bike is running pretty sweet now that it's going. So probably before that, I should have probably mentioned, I've done this in order of the bike, but definitely check out your spark plug before anything. Now this is probably the first thing you should check actually, because it's a really, really simple fix. So make sure the spark plug is screwed tightly into the engine. That was the first thing on mine. It was only finger tight, so that needed shoring up properly. You might need to buy a socket tool to do that. The next thing, what I did was the HT lead, which is coming around here to go on the top of it. I actually cut a tiny little bit off the end of it, off this black part of the cable, and then just reinserted it back into the HT kind of head elbow thing here. It's really, really simple to do. You just have to yank it out the back and then cut the end off, and then you kind of screw it back on. And that just means it'll be fresh wire that's touching the inside of this particular area, and just means it's a bit fresher. And have a look inside this part as well. Look down the barrel and just make sure it's all clean. That'll definitely help out as well. Then You might as well just buy a new spark plug, especially if you're buying a used bike. They're really, really cheap. I think I bought a new spark plug for this, and I think it was less than £2. It might have even been £1.50. I can't remember off the top of my head, but they're not expensive, so it's definitely worth doing. Just make sure you get the right gap for your particular bike. So have a look online and see which gap you need for your bike. This was a 0.07 gap, so I got the appropriate plug for that, and I was able to get it at Whole Foods. So it was really easy. I could just go to Whole Foods and pick one of those up, and then I had a brand new spark plug. If you absolutely can't get a new spark plug, just take the plug out, unscrew it, make sure it's all clean, and wipe any crap off it, because that could be the difference between getting your bike started and not getting it started. So that's definitely probably the first thing you should check, is just check the plug, just because it's a really easy fix. But because I was going down the order of the bike, I've just ended up mentioning that one a little bit later. So there's two more things that you could possibly check, which I haven't done, and the bike now runs. Inside here, especially on these Honda engines, inside this bit here, you can pull this cap off. It's really easy to do, and you can check your points, it's called. So your points need to be open and closing at a specific time, and it's to do with the timing of the piston going to the top and going to the bottom. So again, you can dig out the online manual for this and check, and there's markings on the wheel inside here. You can have a look at those and make sure it all works. The way I did it was I put a piece of paper inside the contact point, and then I turned it with my hand, and I kept tension on that piece of paper, and then I could see when it was opening and closing, because when it would open, the paper would come towards me, because obviously I was holding it with tension. So that's a really, really simple way you can check your contact points are opening and closing correctly. And again, that can be one of the reasons why your bike might not start, is because the timing's out. So if you hear about timing and your spark timing, etc., it will be to do with that. Your contact point will be out of time with your piston. I think that's pretty much what's going on. And as a result of that, it won't fire. One more thing in the front of this engine as well is the valves. Now, you will have to buy a little measuring tool for these. They're really, really thin little bits of metal that are specific measurements in thickness. And you open this up, you look at the valves, and you check that they are the correct amount apart. You can adjust those and make the performance of your bike a little bit better as well. So check the manual for that, check what width you need, and buy one of those tools. Again, I haven't had to do that. That was going to be one of the things that I was going to do if the bike still didn't start. But yeah, go ahead and check your valves are correctly spaced. I think that's the right terminology for it, basically. That will help with your bike starting. It'll just help with the overall performance of it as well. One last thing to note about the carb, which I forgot to mention, is between the carb here and the inlet manifold, so this is where it will take the air and the fuel and put it down into the engine, there should be a gasket. Now, with an older bike, these are most likely to be completely shot, and what can happen as a result of that being shot is that you get a vacuum leak. So you'll get some sort of leak here, basically, in layman's terms, which means the engine won't start. That's the simplest way to put it. All you have to do is make one out of a cereal box. So that's what I've done here. I had a gasket in there, but it was really, really falling apart. But you only need a cardboard gasket for these bikes. So I took that one out, traced the shape onto a piece of cereal box, and then fitted that, and that caused a nice seal. The fuel will seep into this, basically, and make it wet, and then it creates a seal, so that will stop any leaks. So that's definitely something I would recommend checking, because it's a really easy fix as well. And most likely you've got either a cereal box or some thick card lying around. You can just make your own gasket, and it's super simple to do. Okay guys, so that's pretty much everything that I went through to get this bike started, and eventually I did get it started. Now, the thing that I think specifically about this bike, why it wouldn't start, is that the pilot jet in the carb was blocked. So I stripped down the carb once and tried to start the bike, and it didn't work. Then I decided to strip down the carb again and have another proper look, because I was pretty much convinced that the bike wasn't getting enough fuel, because it was starting up with the easy start down the carb. It wasn't keeping itself running. So I thought, well, I don't think the engine is getting fuel, because it was getting spark, it was getting air. That was pretty much the last thing it could have been. So I opened it up again, and I noticed that next to the main jet, so there's two jets inside my carb. There's a main one, which is meant for the higher end of the rev range, and then there's a thinner one, which is meant for the lower end of the rev range. So that made me start to think, well, if it can't start, that is going to be the lower end of the rev range. And if that pilot jet is blocked, that probably is the reason why it won't start. So I went inside the carb again, had another look, and lo and behold, the pilot jet was blocked. I couldn't believe it that I'd missed it. I actually ended up pulling the pilot jet out because it's like a little brass thing that clips in. I looked down it in a window. So this is the best way to check all your jets. Have a look down the middle and see if you can see daylight through it. Could not see anything through it at all. It was completely blocked. And basically what I ended up doing was holding it with a pair of pliers and heating it up with a lighter. And that freed up all the kind of hardened fuel that had got stuck in there. And it actually ended up leaking out of the end of the jet. So I'm pretty sure, I'm almost 100% convinced, in fact, I'm going to stick my neck out and say that's how convinced I am, that was the reason this bike wouldn't start. So I cleaned all that out, managed to get all the block stuff out by heating it up and put it all back together. And then as soon as I'd done that, the bike fired up again. But at the same time, what I had done is adjusted that fuel to air screw, which I showed you on the carb. And I had also trimmed the end of that HT lead to the spark plug and put that back together. So it could have been a combination of those things. It could have been one of those things. It could have been two of those things. I'll never know for sure, but the good news is that this bike is now running again, and it's running really, really nicely. I've only been driving up and down the back of my house because there's a little passage that I can test it on, and it's running absolutely sweet. So I really hope these things help, guys, because it was a lot of work digging around old forums and things like that, trying to find out why this thing wouldn't start. And I'm just so glad that I got it started, because I was starting to think that I'd got a dud. So this bike now, apart from the fact that it's not registered, is turning out to be a bit of a bargain. I only paid £400 for this, and I've got it running very, very sweetly now. So yeah, I'm super excited about this project. I'm just waiting for a couple of things. Like I mentioned, I'm going to fit that new fuel line, new fuel filter, new cone filter for the air as well, and probably run it around for a bit, try and get it registered, and then I'm going to carry on stripping it down. I hope you enjoyed my first video about starting the back. Yeah, it's going to be really exciting stripping all this down, getting it repainted and making it into like this cafe kind of racer style build. So I have been talking quite a lot in this video, guys. I really appreciate you watching. I hope these things do get your bike running, and I think most of the points that I've said will be applicable to most kinds of motorbikes, because they all work in the same way, especially if you've got a carb like I have on mine. So good luck. I really hope you get your bike running, and I'll be back with more content soon.